Have you ever desperately wished to become someone utterly unshakable, a person for whom criticism simply glances off, rejection holds no sting, loss leaves no lasting scar, and betrayal becomes merely a footnote in a larger, impervious narrative? Have you ever dared to dream of the day when that silent, insidious pain, that deep, persistent anguish which relentlessly eats you up inside, even as you meticulously orchestrate a facade of perfect composure to the external world, would finally mercifully cease to exist? Cease. Perhaps you are utterly exhausted, tired of the relentless, draining effort to constantly please everyone, weary of painstakingly maintaining an image that demands an almost superhuman strength at all times. In truth, all you yearn for is a fleeting moment of genuine repose, a precious pause from the suffocating, ceaseless pressure of perpetually appearing untouchable. You might have constructed intricate psychological fortresses, diligently building invisible walls around the tender core of your heart. Or perhaps you've become a master of emotional detachment, earnestly believing that these elaborate defenses offer genuine, impregnable protection. You have practiced the art of preemptive apathy, deciding not to care before you can be hurt for caring too much. You have reasoned your way out of vulnerability, treating emotions as illogical data points to be suppressed or ignored. Yet despite every painstaking effort, the gnawing vulnerability persists. The familiar pain stubbornly resurfaces with a new face. But the same ancient sting and the elusive dream of true invulnerability remains frustratingly just beyond your grasp, leaving you in a perpetual state of exhausting vigilance. You convince yourself that if you just try harder, build higher walls, or become colder and more cynical, that elusive peace will finally be yours. But let me tell you something that perhaps no one has yet had the courage to truly articulate. As long as you endeavor to systematically avoid pain, to meticulously numb yourself, to protect every perceived weak point, and to meticulously hide the tender parts of your being, you will, with a cruel and unyielding irony, remain an unwitting hostage to everything that happens around you. You will be enslaved by the carelessly chosen words that pierce, by the actions of others that invariably disappoint, and by the chilling, resonant silences that can echo with devastating finality deep within your soul. This is not, let me be clear, a declaration of inherent personal weakness. Rather, it is a stark, unvarnished reality for the vast majority of human beings navigating the complexities of existence. The crucial, often subtle difference lies solely in the sophisticated artistry with which some individuals manage to feign invulnerability, to perform the role of being fine with greater conviction and skill than others. Carl Jung, that intellectual titan and one of the most revolutionary figures in the burgeoning field of depth psychology, did not merely observe this universal human struggle. He offered a radical and transformative reinterpretation, asserting with profound conviction that we are not what happens to us, but what we choose to become. It is precisely within this audacious act of choosing, this pivotal and conscious shift in perspective, that the authentic key to profound liberation, to an enduring freedom, is meticulously hidden. It's not about erecting an impenetrable shield against the world. It's not about meticulously cultivating a cold, indifferent, or utterly untouchable exterior, carefully designed to ward off all perceived threats. On the contrary, true and enduring strength, as Jung so brilliantly illuminated, resides in the profound, often arduous process of integrating. It involves the courageous act of consciously bringing into the light of awareness everything that currently manipulates and affects you from the unseen, shadowy recesses of your being. Every unconscious pattern, every buried memory, every suppressed emotion that subtly dictates your emotional landscape. Because within Jung's transformative framework, genuine strength is never defined by the mere absence of pain or the successful avoidance of suffering. Instead, it is epitomized by the full, unvarnished and courageous awareness of who you are, precisely in those moments when you feel most exposed and vulnerable, even when you are metaphorically bleeding from the wounds of life. The prison of the persona, the mask that becomes the face. The first and most formidable barrier to this authentic strength is the very face you show to the world. Jung called this the persona. It is your social mask, the carefully curated collection of traits, behaviors, and beliefs that you have assembled to navigate the world and gain acceptance. It is the good employee, the loving partner, the strong friend, the witty intellectual, the laid-back free spirit. This persona is not inherently evil. It is a necessary tool for social interaction. It was born of a primal need for survival. As a child, you were a psychic sponge, learning with uncanny precision which parts of your authentic self were celebrated and which were punished, shamed, or ignored. You learned that showing your anger might lead to rejection, that expressing your neediness might be met with annoyance, that your spontaneous joy might be seen as disruptive, or perhaps that your innate intelligence was a threat to a fragile parent. And so you began the work of the sculptor, chipping away at the raw marble of your true self, discarding the unacceptable pieces and polishing the acceptable ones until you had a smooth, pleasing statue to present to the world. This was a masterpiece of adaptation. It kept you safe. It secured you a place within the tribe. The tragedy occurs when you forget that you are the sculptor and begin to believe that you are the statue. You become so identified with the mask that you lose all connection to the face beneath. The persona that was meant to be a tool for navigating the world becomes the prison that defines your reality. Your life becomes a performance. The terrifying part is that you are the sole actor, director, and audience, trapped in a play of your own making. The exhaustion you feel, that deep soul-level weariness that no amount of sleep can cure, is the immense, unsustainable, energetic cost of this lifelong performance. You are constantly monitoring, calculating, and adjusting the mask to ensure it meets the perceived expectations of others. You live in a state of perpetual low-grade terror that someone will see a crack in the facade and expose the raw, chaotic, and intensely human reality you have so desperately tried to hide. The brutal truth is that your persona, the very thing you believe protects you, is the primary reason you suffer so much. It is a rigid, brittle structure. When life strikes, with a criticism, a rejection, a failure, it does not strike your resilient, adaptable true self. It strikes this rigid mask, and the mask, being inflexible, shatters. The pain you feel is the shattering of this false identity, the terror of being exposed without your costume. Furthermore, because your persona is designed to please everyone, it has no solid core of its own. It renders you utterly dependent on external validation. Your sense of self-worth becomes a desperate, fluctuating commodity, rising and falling with the moods and opinions of those around you. You are a ship without a rudder, tossed violently on the waves of others' approval. This is the very definition of enslavement. The path to becoming untouchable does not involve strengthening the mask, applying another layer of polish to the statue. It involves the terrifying, courageous act of beginning to take it off, piece by piece, until you can once again feel the air on your own skin. The whispers from the basement. Encountering the shadow. What lies beneath this carefully constructed mask? What is it that you are so terrified of revealing? This is the domain of what Jung called the shadow. The shadow is the dark side of our personality, the vast subterranean basement of our psyche, where we have banished every aspect of ourselves that we have deemed unacceptable, inferior, or evil. It is the repository of our repressed anger, our secret shames, our forbidden desires, our envy, our greed, our raw ambition, and our profound, aching neediness. It is everything we have been taught not to be, everything we vehemently deny we are. Your conscious mind, your ego, wants nothing to do with the shadow. It works tirelessly to keep the basement door locked and bolted. You believe that if you do not look at it, it does not exist. But this is a fatal error. You project your shadow onto others. The arrogance you despise in your boss, the laziness you condemn in your colleague, the selfishness you judge in your friend. Very often, these are disowned parts of your own being, staring back at you from the faces of others. The world becomes a mirror for the parts of yourself you refuse to see. The more vehemently you deny a trait in yourself, the more violently you will react to it in someone else. This is the shadow's game of projection, and it is the source of a vast amount of interpersonal conflict and irrational hatred. It is why you find yourself locked in recurring battles with the same type of person, never realizing you are wrestling with your own ghost. But the shadow does not only contain the negative, it also holds what Jungian analyst Robert A. Johnson called the golden shadow, the repository of your disowned positive qualities. Perhaps you had to suppress your brilliance so as not to outshine a sibling, or hide your artistic sensitivity in a family that valued only pragmatism, or cage your raw power because it was deemed unladylike or too aggressive. Your gold, your greatest potential, may be lying dormant in the same dark basement as your demons, because at some point in your life, its light was too bright for those around you to bear. The shadow cannot be locked away forever. It is a living, dynamic part of you, and it yearns for integration. When it is ignored, it does not disappear. It festers. It begins to leak out, to seep through the floorboards of your conscious life in destructive and uncontrollable ways. These are your self-sabotaging behaviors, your inexplicable moods, your addictions, your compulsions. Consider your own recurring, vexing patterns, the seemingly endless scrolling through digital feeds that steals hours, the compulsive overeating that brings fleeting comfort but lasting regret, or the perpetual procrastination that sabotages your most vital projects. These might initially appear to be random acts of self-sabotage, easily dismissed as mere laziness or a lack of discipline. However, from a Jungian perspective, each of these actions is a deeply coded message, a symbolic communication from the depths. The shadow employs these actions not out of malice, but as a primitive protective mechanism. It utilizes them to shield you from having to directly confront profound loneliness, from facing the raw terror of an unacknowledged fear, or from sitting with the deep discomfort of emotions you have consistently refused to process. The pain you experience is a direct result of this internal division. You are a house at war with itself. Your conscious ego is pulling in one direction, towards the light of the persona, while your unconscious shadow is pulling in another, towards the darkness of what has been repressed, the suffering, the anxiety, the depression. This is the sound of your soul tearing itself apart. The only way to end this war is not to fight the shadow, not to try to kill it or suppress it further. That will only make it stronger. The only way is to do the one thing you have spent your entire life avoiding. You must turn around, unlock the basement door, and walk down into the darkness with a lamp in your hand. You must face the parts of yourself you have abandoned. The sacred work of integration, listening to the language of pain. Therefore, the critical path to true emotional mastery doesn't involve an act of futile resistance, but a courageous, introspective journey towards profound awareness. The very first and arguably most challenging step involves cultivating a radical, non-judgmental self-observation. The next time the familiar, overwhelming urge arises to engage in one of those self-sabotaging habits, be it mindless scrolling, emotional eating, or delaying a crucial task. Pause. Do not immediately condemn yourself or attempt to suppress the impulse. This self-flagellation is merely another trick of the ego to avoid the real work. Instead, with a curious and gentle demeanor, ask yourself a vital question. What specific feeling or thought triggered this intense urge? What underlying emotion is this behavior trying to either express, escape, or numb? If this urge could speak, what would it say? Imagine you are an impartial scientist or a compassionate friend studying a fascinating phenomenon. Observe the sensation, the thought, the impulse. Each moment of conscious pause is a precious window into your inner landscape, offering a profound chance to integrate what has been systematically ignored. It is through this consistent practice of metacognition, thinking about your thinking, feeling about your feeling, that you begin to listen to the communications from your unconscious. This listening is not about finding fault, but about understanding. It's about recognizing the legitimate needs that your shadow parts are trying to communicate, however clumsily. By consciously acknowledging these messages, rather than instinctively recoiling, you begin the intricate process of bridging the chasm between your conscious ego and your vast unconscious. Let us make this tangible. Consider the archetypal figure of the workaholic, a man, let's call him Arthur, who dedicates every waking hour to his demanding career. On the surface, his relentless drive appears as ambition. However, through this lens of Jungian introspection, Arthur might eventually discover that his compulsive overworking is an elaborate shield against a profound terror of intimacy and a deep-seated fear of being worthless without his achievements. The long hours are not solely about professional advancement, but serve as an unconscious diversion from the painful silence in his marriage and the gnawing emptiness he feels when he is not being productive. Once Arthur, through courageous self-inquiry, acknowledges this underlying fear, the fear of not being enough as a man, a partner, a human being, the obsessive compulsion to work begins to lose its suffocating grip. The drive shifts from an anxious avoidance to a conscious choice. Work no longer dominates his existence as a frantic escape, but becomes one integrated aspect of a more balanced life. Similarly, a young woman, Sarah, who perpetually finds herself in toxic, one-sided relationships, might initially blame bad luck or the character of her partners. Yet by diving into her unconscious patterns, she might uncover a shadow aspect rooted in early abandonment fears or a deep-seated belief in her own unworthiness, causing her to unconsciously seek out relationships that mirror and reinforce these unintegrated traumas. When she recognizes and begins to integrate these forgotten wounds by learning to give herself the love and validation she seeks from others, by mothering the abandoned child within her, her relational patterns naturally begin to shift. She no longer gravitates towards partners who perpetuate her old pains, but instead chooses relationships rooted in mutual respect. In both scenarios, the pattern doesn't disappear through sheer willpower, but fades naturally as its underlying message is finally heard, understood, and integrated. Jung perceived suffering in an entirely different, almost sacred light. He profoundly believed that pain was the unequivocal messenger of the soul, the urgent alarm system of the unconscious. The very language that the self, that totality of who you are conscious and unconscious, employs to command your attention. He famously mused, "Depression is like a lady in black. If she appears, don't push her away. Invite her to sit down, offer her a coffee, and listen to what she has to say. But you don't listen. You silence yourself, distract yourself, keep yourself perpetually busy. You do everything conceivable to avoid sitting in that quiet room with that dark guest. And so she must shout louder, the pain must intensify, the anxiety must become crippling. The suffering only hurts so profoundly because you are still at war with yourself. There remains a part of you yearning for expansion, battling against another part that desperately clings to the familiar. And it is in this profound internal friction, this agonizing resistance to your own evolution, that pain is born. The path of the hero, individuation, and the birth of the true self. This journey of integration, of making the unconscious conscious, is what Jung called individuation. It is the single most important and arduous task of a human life. It is the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are, of differentiating your true self from the collective masks and projections of the world, and of integrating the disparate parts of your psyche into a functioning, cohesive whole. It is the alchemical process of turning the lead of your raw, unconscious suffering into the gold of conscious, integrated being. Individuation is not a process of perfection, Jung famously stated, but of integration. You do not need to become a better person in the conventional social sense. You simply need to become a whole person. This path, however, unequivocally demands courage. It is the archetypal hero's journey, the descent into the underworld of your own psyche, to confront the monsters you have hidden there, and to retrieve the treasure of your authentic self. Few people possess the immense fortitude required to even begin this journey. It makes no promises of comfort. It offers no guarantees of ease. It does not fundamentally protect your fragile ego. It dismantles it. Jung referred to individuation not merely as a process of becoming who you are, but more profoundly as a process of unlearning who you think you are. And that, my friend, hurts more deeply than any external rejection, any public humiliation. Because you begin to realize that much of what has defined you, what you have clung to as yourself, was an elaborate illusion, a survival mechanism crafted by a frightened child. As you walk this path, you will be called upon to metaphorically shed your own skin, to tear away the familiar layers of the persona in order to finally discover the raw, authentic being that lies beneath. It is precisely within this arduous, deconstructive process that you begin to become truly untouchable, not because nothing affects you anymore, but because you have already courageously walked through the purifying fire of your own depths. You have faced your inner monsters. You have looked unflinchingly into the eyes of your shame, your neediness, your anger, and your terror, and you have declared, "I see you, you are a part of me, and you no longer control me from the dark." It is this profound internal clarity, this unwavering lucidity in the face of your own darkness, that bestows upon you a strength that is utterly independent of external approval. You no longer need to be universally loved. You no longer feel the compulsive urge to win every argument. You no longer feel the desperate need to appear strong, because you fundamentally know who you are, and absolutely no one, nothing can ever truly take that sacred knowledge away from you. True emotional armor is not a hard, impenetrable shell. It is a resilient, integrated core. It is the harmonious assimilation of all your disparate parts, light and shadow, conscious and unconscious, into a centered, unwavering consciousness that remains fundamentally unshaken in the face of life's most brutal storms. You may still feel pain, but it no longer shatters you. You may still be hurt, but you do not lose yourself in the wreckage, because you have ceased being merely reactive and have instead become whole. The unbreachable fortress, consciousness as the ultimate shield. We now arrive at the culmination of this profound work, the final realization that turns the entire problem of being hurt on its head. You have spent your life trying to build an unbreachable fortress on the outside. You have tried to control the world, control others' opinions, and armor your heart with cynicism and detachment. But the true fortress is not external, it is internal. It is not built of stone walls. It is woven from the very fabric of your own expanded consciousness. When you have integrated your shadow, you become immune to the projections of others. If someone calls you selfish, and you have already faced and accepted the selfish part of your own nature, the word has no sting. It is simply an observation of a truth you have already embraced. It would be like being accused of having brown hair. The insult only has power when it strikes a part of your shadow that you are still denying, a button connected to a hidden wound. When you live in the light of full self-awareness, the insults of others become like arrows shot at a ghost. They pass right through, for there is no solid denied self for them to hit. When you have dissolved your over-identification with the persona, you become immune to the pain of social rejection. Your sense of worth is no longer located in the approval of the tribe. It is anchored in the deep, unshakable soil of your own being, in your connection to the self. Rejection may be disappointing, it may be inconvenient, but it is no longer an existential threat, no longer a verdict on your right to exist. You are not the mask that was rejected. You are the whole conscious being who is witnessing the event. This detachment is not a cold indifference, but a profound peace that comes from having a home within yourself, a sanctuary that no external force can ever violate. This is the ultimate secret. Nobody and nothing can ever truly hurt you again, not because you have become hard, but because you have become whole. You become untouchable when you realize that no one can inflict lasting harm upon what has already been fully embraced, understood, and integrated within you. When you cease to fear your own flaws, your own insecurities, your own darkness, you stop reacting viscerally to every external trigger. You observe, you choose, you respond from a place of internal sovereignty. You are no longer an emotional puppet dancing to the whims of others. And that is the very essence of true freedom. What truly shields you is not the futile act of protecting yourself from life. It is the courageous act of diving into life's depths, fully and unequivocally. Those who choose to remain perpetually on the shallow surface are inevitably tossed and bruised by every passing wave. But those who dare to dive deep, who have cultivated their inner awareness, know with unwavering certainty that in the profound depths there exists an enduring silence, an unshakable stability, and an immense quiet power. And that, dear seeker, is precisely where you are now headed. When you begin to live from that integrated place of deep presence and unwavering awareness, the world may continue its attempts to knock you down, but it will no longer find where to hit you. It will no longer find the unintegrated wound, the unacknowledged shadow, the unexamined fear. You will stand, not invulnerable, but whole, and in that wholeness you will discover a strength that is truly unbreakable. If this profound message has resonated with you, if something deep within you has stirred and awakened, then affirm your choice. Affirm that you are ready for this truth. You are ready to transcend. You are ready to come home to yourself.